everybody. All right, we are on to fantasy lesson number 8. All right, and our objective today is to focus on the text structure of fantasy books. Most fantasy stories are organized around the quest. The quest is the adventure that the characters go on in order to solve the problem. There is usually one central problem in which they are either trying to get an object or answer a question, and the whole book is organized around that quest. There are 2 types of quests. There can be an internal quest. An internal quest is what happens inside of the character's head, okay? Internal, inside. An internal quest involves all of the struggles, ups and downs that people go through when they are trying to solve a problem, right? When we are solving problems, growing, learning, we are changing a little bit by over time, because when we come against a conflict, we have to decide how we are going to handle it. And that in some ways will change us. So there is an internal quest and there's also an external quest. The external quests are all the places that the characters go on in order to solve the problem and meet the goal of the quest. So, for example, if on Paw Patrol there is a lost dolphin at sea, the Paw Patrol is called. Marshall Dog is here, and he realizes, I have a quest. I am going to save that dolphin. So first he needs to go and get his fire truck, because every dolphin saving involves a great fire truck. And then he takes off, I'm going to solve the day, but then he realizes, wait, I'm going to save the day, but I need gas. So he goes to the gas station. And then he gets to the ocean and he realizes, wait, I don't have a boat. So then he goes to the boat shop. He gets a boat, but then he realizes he forgot his money. So then he goes back to his house to get his money and then goes back to the boat shop. All of these places that he goes to in order to finally save the dolphin are examples of places that would be in the external quest. They are things in which the character does in order to solve the problem. External, outside of the body. Internal, inside the body. So we're going to listen to The Thief of Always, 2 more chapters. Let's see, I think we're on, 14, 15, 16 and 17 now. We're going to listen to those chapters, and then we're going to talk about the quests of Harvey. All right, what is happening inside of Harvey's head? So what is Harvey's internal quest? And what is happening outside of Harvey's head? What is his external quest? Okay, let's listen.
Go, he said. We don't have any choice. So, when do we start? Now, said Harvey grimly. We've lost too much time already. Chapter 16. Back to the Happy Land. It was as if the house knew that they were coming back and was calling to them. As soon as they stepped out into the street, their feet seemed to know the way. All they had to do was let them lead. What do we do when we get there? Wendell wanted to know. I mean, we only just escaped with our lives last time. Mrs. Griffin will help us, Harvey said. Wendell's breath quickened. Suppose Karna bit her head off, he said. Then we'll have to do it alone. Do what? Find Hood. But you told me he was dead. I don't think being dead means much to a creature like him, Harvey said. He's in the house somewhere, Wendell, and we have to hunt him down whether we like it or not. He's the one who stole all those years with our moms and dads, and we won't get them back until we face him. You make it sound easy, Wendell said. The whole house is a box of tricks, Harvey reminded him. The seasons, the presents, they're all illusions. We have to hold on to that. Harvey, look. Wendell pointed ahead of them. Harvey knew the street at a glance. 33 days ago, he'd stood here with Rictus and listened to the tempter tell him what a fine place lay on the other side of the mist wall up ahead. This is it, then, Harvey said. It was strange, but he didn't feel afraid. even though he knew they were walking back into their enemy's arms. It was better to face Hood and his illusions now than to spend the rest of his life wondering about Lulu and mourning the years he'd lost. "Are you ready?" he asked Wendell. "Before we go," his friend replied, "can we get just one thing straight? If the house is all illusions, then how come we felt the cold? And how come I got fat from eating Mrs. Griffin's pies and—" "I don't know," Harvey cut in, doubt running a cold finger up his spine. "I can't explain how Hood's magic works. All I know is he took all those years away to feed himself." "Feed?" "Yeah, like a vampire." This was the first time Harvey had thought of Hood that way, but it instinctively seemed right. Blood was life, and life was what Hood fed upon. He was a vampire, sure enough, maybe a king among vampires. "So shouldn't we have a steak or holy water or something?" "That's just in stories," Harvey said. "But if he comes after us?" "We fight." "Fight with what?" Harvey shrugged. The truth was he didn't know, but he was sure that crosses and prayers weren't going to be any use in the battle that lay ahead. "No more talk," he said to Wendell. "If you don't want to come, then don't." "I didn't say that." "Good," said Harvey, and started toward the mist. Wendell followed on his heels, and just as Harvey stepped into the wall, he snatched hold of his friend's sleeve so that they entered as they had exited, together. The mist closed around them like a water-logged blanket, pressing so hard against their faces, Harvey half thought it intended to smother them. But it only wished to keep them from changing their minds. A moment later, a tremor moved through its folds and spat them out the other side. It was high summer in Hood's kingdom, the lazy season. The sun, which had been hidden by rain clouds on the other side of the mist, was beaming down on the house and all that prospered around it. The trees swayed in a balmy breeze. The doors and windows of the house, its porch and chimneys, all gleamed as if newly painted. There were welcoming songs in the eaves, welcoming smells from the kitchen, welcoming laughter through the open door. Welcome everywhere, welcome. "I'd forgotten," Wendell murmured. "Forgotten what?" "How beautiful it is." "Don't trust it," Harvey said. "It's all illusion, remember? All of it." Wendell didn't reply, but wandered away toward the trees. The honeyed breeze gusted around him as if to pluck him up. He didn't resist, but went where it led, into the dappled shade. "Wendell," Harvey said, following him across the lawn. "We've got to stick together." "I'd forgotten about the tree house," Wendell said dreamily, staring up into the canopy. "We had such fun up there, remember?" "No," said Harvey, determined not to let the past distract him from his mission here. "I don't remember." "Yes, you do," said Wendell, smiling from ear to ear. "We worked so hard up there. I'm going up to see how it looks." Harvey grabbed his arm. "No, you're not." "Yes, I am," he snapped back, wrenching his arm from Harvey's grip. "I can do whatever I want. You don't own me." Harvey could see by the glazed look in Wendell's eyes that the house was already working its seductive magic. It could only be a matter of time, he knew, before his own powers of resistance were worn away. And what then? Would he forget his work here entirely and become an empty-headed boy, laughing like a loon while his soul was sucked away? "No," he said aloud. "I'm not going to let you do it." "Do what?" said Wendell. "We've got work to do," Harvey told him. "Who cares?" Wendell replied. "I do, and so did you 5 minutes ago. Remember what it did to us, Wendell?" The wind in trees seemed to sigh at this. "Ah," it said, as if it now understood Harvey's purpose here, and would waft this intelligence to the ears of Mr. Hood. Harvey didn't care. In fact, he was pleased. "Go on," he said, as the gusts flew toward the house. Tell him! Tell him!" He turned on Wendell. "Are you coming?" he said. Or am I going to go in alone? Well, I don't mind going in, Wendell said cheerily. I'm hungry. Harvey stared hard at Wendell. Don't you remember anything we said out there? He demanded. Of course I do, Wendell replied. We said we were going to... He paused, frowning. Going to... This place has stolen time that belonged to us, Wendell. How did it do that? Said Wendell, still frowning deeply. It's just... Again he faltered, searching for the words. Just such a perfect day. The frown began to fade again, and a broad smile replaced it. Who cares? Wendell said. I mean, on a day like this, who cares? Let's just enjoy ourselves. Harvey shook his head. He was losing precious time here, which was exactly what Hood and the house wanted. Instead of wasting any further words on Wendell, he turned on his heel and headed toward the front door. Wait for me, Wendell hollered. Can you smell that pie? Harvey could, and wished he'd put some food in his belly before he'd started out on this adventure. Knowing that these tantalizing smells were all part of Hood's repertoire wasn't enough to stop his mouth from watering or his stomach from grumbling. All he could do was think of the dust to which his ark animals had turned when he'd stepped out into the street. The pie on the kitchen table was probably made of the same bitter stuff, concealed beneath a veneer of sweetness. He held on to that thought as best he could, knowing that the house into which he was about to step would be full of such blandishments. With Wendell again trailing a step behind, he climbed the porch steps and marched into the house. The moment they were both inside, the door slammed behind them. Harvey reeled around, his skin crawling. It was not the wind that had thrown the door shut. It was Rictus. Chapter 17. Cook, Cat, and Coffin. Great to have you back, boy, Rictus said, his smile as wide as ever. I told everyone you wouldn't be able to stay away. Nobody believed me. He's gone, they said. He's gone. But I knew better. He started to wander toward Harvey. I knew you wouldn't be satisfied with a little visit, not with so much fun still to be had. I'm hungry, Wendell whined. Help yourselves, Rictus grinned. Wendell was off at a sprint into the kitchen. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, he hollered. Look at all this food. Harvey didn't reply. Aren't you hungry? Rictus said, raising an eyebrow high above his spectacles. He cupped his hand behind his ear. That sounds like an empty belly to me. Where's Mrs. Griffin? Harvey said. Oh, she's around, Rictus said mischievously. But she's getting old. She takes to her bed a good deal these days, so we laid her down somewhere safe and sound. As he spoke, there was a mewling sound from the living room, and there at the door stood Stew Cat. Rictus scowled. Get out of here, pussy, he spat. Can't you see we're having a conversation? But Stew Cat wasn't about to be intimidated. She sauntered over to Harvey, rubbing herself against his legs. What do you want? Harvey said, going down on his haunches to stroke her. She purred loudly. Hey, that's fine and dandy, Rictus said, putting off his anger in favor of a freshly polished smile. You like the cat. The cat likes you. Everybody's happy. I'm not happy, Harvey said. And why's that? I left all my presents here, and I don't know where. No problem, said Rictus. I'll find 'em for you. Would you do that? Harvey said. Sure, kid, said Rictus, persuaded that his charm was working again. That's what we're all here for, to give you whatever your heart desires. I think maybe I left 'em up in my bedroom, Harvey suggested. You know, I think I saw 'em up there, Rictus replied. You stay right here. I'll be back. He took himself up the stairs 2 and 3 at a time, whistling tunelessly through his teeth as he ascended. Harvey waited until he disappeared from sight, and then went to check on Wendell, letting Stu Cat slip away. "Ah, now, look at this," a voice said as he appeared at the kitchen door. It was Jive. He was standing at the stove, as sinewy as ever, juggling eggs with one hand and tossing pancakes in a pan with the other. "What do you fancy?" he said. "Sweet or savory?" "Nothing," Harvey said. "It's all good," Wendell piped up. He was almost hidden behind a wall of filled plates. "Try the apple turnovers. They're great." Harvey was sorely tempted. The buffet looked wonderfully tempting, but it was dust. He had to keep remembering that. "Maybe later," he said, averting his eyes from the heaps of syrup-drenched waffles and bowls of ice cream. "Where are you going?" Jive wanted to know. "Mr. Rictus is finding a few presents for me," Harvey said. Jive smiled with satisfaction. "So you're getting back into the swing of things, kiddo," he said. "Good for you." "I've missed being here," Harvey replied. He didn't linger, just in case Jive saw the lie in his eyes, but turned and headed back into the hallway. Stu Cat was still there, staring at him. "What is it?" he said. The cat took off toward the stairs, then stopped and cast a backward glance. "Have you something to show me?" Harvey whispered. At this, the cat bounded off again. Harvey followed, expecting her to lead the way upstairs. But before she reached the bottom step, she veered off to her left and led Harvey down a narrow passage to a door he had never even noticed before. He rattled the handle, but the door was locked. Turning to look for Stu Cat, he found her rubbing her arched back against the leg of a small table set nearby. On the table was a carved wooden box. In the box was a key. He went back to the door, unlocked it, and pulled it open. There was a flight of wooden steps in front of him, leading down into a darkness from which a sour, dank smell rose. He might have declined to descend had Stu Cat not hurried on past him, down into the murk. With his fingers trailing on the damp walls to the left and right of him, he followed Stu Cat to the bottom of the flight, counting the steps as he went. There were 52, and by the time he had descended them all, his eyes had become reasonably accustomed to the gloom. The cellar was cavernous but empty, except for a litter of rubble and a large wooden box, which lay in the dust maybe a dozen yards from where he stood. "What is it?" he hissed to Stu Cat, knowing the creature had no way of replying, but hoping for some sign nevertheless. Stu Cat's only answer was to run across the floor and leap nimbly up onto the box, where it began to claw at the wood. Harvey's curiosity was stronger than his fear, but not so much stronger that he dashed to pull off the lid. He approached as though the box were some sleeping beast, which for all he knew it was. The closer he got, the more it resembled a crude coffin. But what kind of coffin was sealed with a padlock? Was this where Karna had been laid, perhaps, after the beast had dragged its wounded body back home? Was it even now listening to Stu Cat scratch on the lid, waiting for release? As he came within a yard of the casket, however, he laid eyes on a clue to its contents. An apron string, left hanging out of the box by whoever had locked it. He knew of only one person in the house who wore an apron. "Mrs. Griffin," he whispered, digging his fingernails under the lid. "Mrs. Griffin, are you in there?" There was a muffled thump from inside. "I'm going to get you out," he promised, hauling on the lid as hard as he could. He didn't have the strength to break the lock. In desperation, he began to search the cellar, looking for some tool or other, and found himself 2 sizable rocks. Hefting them, he returned to the casket. "This is going to be noisy," he warned Mrs. Griffin. Then, using one stone as a kind of chisel and the other as a hammer, he assaulted the lock. Blue sparks flew as he struck at the metal, but he seemed to be making no impression until, all of a sudden, the lock gave a loud crack and fell to the ground. He paused for a moment, a feather of doubt brushing his brow. Suppose it was Karna's coffin? Then he threw the rocks aside and hauled off the lid. Chapter 18. The Bitter Truth.
Alright, so now I want to show you what I want you to do for your own books. So I'm going to model this with Harvey and his adventures in The Thief of Always. I'm going to zoom out and take myself out of it so I can just kind of walk you through it, okay?
Okay, so here's an example of what I would like you to do. At the top, you notice I have the title of the book. You are going to do the title of the book that you are focused on. If you'd prefer to focus on the series and the quest that is happening throughout the whole series, that is fine. You are going to be making two different maps of the quests. You're going to be making one map for the external quest, the things that the character does outside of their head, and also a map for the character's internal quest. The struggles, the flaws, the things that the character has to overcome internally, inside their head. As you see in The Thief of Always, this one is an example of Harvey's external quest. He starts off and he goes to the holiday house. He escapes the house. Then he finds his own home. Then he goes back to the house. And you notice I've left some space there because the story is not done. Okay, so now let's look at Harvey's internal quest. Remember, internal is happening inside of Harvey's mind. It starts out at the beginning of the book, and Harvey is dealing with boredom. Then he gets to the holiday house, and he is excited and overjoyed by all of the gifts and fun, activities, foods that he is experiencing. Then he starts to miss his parents a bit. Then he notices that he's having to resist the greedy impulses that he has because he realizes, wait, something is not right here. Then he has to actually take on and tackle the evil forces in the house. And then he's trying to have courage and sacrifice himself in order for the good of Wendell, and we will see what happens in the end. But this is an example of Harvey's internal quest. For your story, you are going to make two maps, one for the internal, one for the external. You can pick a main character in the story to focus on. You can also focus on multiple characters if you would like to make different maps, if there are many multiple plot lines happening at the same time. Okay? All right. I hope you have a lovely day. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.